Hello, everyone. Sorry to keep you waiting. We wanted to keep you all in anticipation. Oh, I should have said it like Dr. Frankenfurter. Anyway, congrats and welcome to tonight's event. We have two wonderful authors. We, of course, are celebrating Kate Khavari's latest installment in her mystery series, A Botanist's Guide to Flowers and Fatality. Yay! And joining in conversation, we have Deanna Raybourn. Hello to both of you.
Hi, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for making this possible. For those tuning in for the first time, Kate is the author of fiction ranging from historical mysteries to high fantasy epics. A former teacher, Kate has a deep appreciation for research and creativity, not to mention the multitasking ability she now relies on as an author and stay-at-home mother to her toddler son. That is a lot of multitasking right there, especially like writing. What are you doing? What's happening? What's going over here?
Definitely. Although I think you would probably object to me calling him a toddler because he's 4 now, so I need to update my bio.
Oh, hey, your babies are always your babies. He could be 14 and toddlers to leave. And of course, in conversation, we have Deanna Raybourn, who's a New York Times and UTSA Today best-selling novelist and a sixth-generation Texan. Yeehaw, I had to say it. With a degree in English and history from UTSA. Her novels have been nominated for numerous awards, including the Edgar, RT Reviewer's Choice, the Agatha, 2 Dilys Winns?
Dilys, yeah.
Dilys Winns, okay.
Yeah, it's a British award.
Ah, okay. And the last laugh. But of course, today we are talking about The Botanist's Guide to Flowers and Vitality, the follow-up to A Botanist's Guide to Parties and... I'm blanking.
Poisons.
Thank you. The other P word. Anyone who is watching live right now or in the future, if you would like to purchase any one of these two authors' books, we have a double duo of fun swag. Signed book plates for Kate and Deanna, as well as some cool bookmarks to go with your copies of Kate's books. I had to flip it the other way around. A reminder, those are while supplies last. If you do order online, just make sure you say in your comment section you would like the book plate as a reminder. All right. And then if you have any questions you would like to ask later in the event, you'll also notice if you're watching live, there's a link below that says ask a question. You can submit any questions you would like to ask there, and they'll be answered later on. Okay, I think I've done enough gabbing. I'm going to leave it to these authors to take it away, but I'll see everyone at the end. See ya.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's like slumber party. It's just us. And all
that
the
is
readers
exciting
gathered around to watch us. No, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Okay, so this is book 2 with Saffron Everly. She is our botanist, our titular botanist.
Yes.
Tell us very briefly about Saffron Everly and what she's up to.
So, I mean, you gave a perfect introduction. She is a botanist. She is a researcher at the University College London in 1923. It's when the books take place. And she is, I mean, she's just there because she is a big science nerd. And she wants to contribute and be a part of science in this really exciting time for science in post-war Europe. So she's there trying to make a name for herself, following in her father's footsteps. She just somehow comes across crimes, and she
as you
solves
do
crimes, as one does in this kind of book. And she uses her botanical expertise as well as her kind of unwieldy curiosity to solve these crimes that she gets involved in.
She was introduced in The Botanist's Guide to Parties and Poisons, which came out 2 years ago?
Last year.
Okay. I knew it was fairly recent. So very briefly in that one, we meet Saffron for the first time. We get a dead body at a dinner party, which is one of my favorite things ever, which is probably why I don't host dinner parties. And now this is a spoiler-free zone, folks. We are not going to spoil Flowers and Fatality in any way, shape, or form, but give us briefly the setup for this one. What's our intro for Flowers and Fatality?
So Saffron is in the midst of a study. It's her first study that she's conducting herself, and she's got a really obnoxious and yet handsome partner that she's working with. And she is working at the university over the summer. Inspector Green, who is the same inspector from the first book, comes and says, hey, I have these homicide victims, and the only connection between them is that they both have received these bouquets that are tied with black ribbon. And I recognized one of the flowers as poisonous from our last case. So she is invited to consult. And so she tells him about the flowers, but she's kind of noticing that some of them are kind of weird. Like, would they include this plant over another plant? So she does some digging, and she finds that there is, in fact, messages within these bouquets that these women were given before they were murdered, that she finds through the use of florography, which is the Victorian practice of sending secret messages through flowers. And yes, this was a real thing that actually happened.
It actually did, because I write Victoriana, and people, they would communicate through gemstones, they would communicate through the language of fans, and florography is probably the coolest way that they would communicate. What are some of the messages that people would send via flowers? Give us the flowers so we know the code.
Oh, I need to look at the bookmark, actually, because I designed these bookmarks myself, and I wanted to have the flowers on the back, because as I was writing it, I couldn't remember. So I had to keep flipping back.
So cool.
So I'm like,
so anybody who contacts Mysterious and orders a book, you need to make absolutely sure you get this bookmark, because that is so kick-ass. So read us some of the codes.
Okay, so some of the flowers that are include aconite, which is wolfsbane.
Monkshood.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a million names for it, right? And it means treachery. And then we have buttercup, which can mean desire for riches or childishness. Foxglove for insincerity. And there's like many others. Rosemary for remembrance, if you know your Shakespeare. Pomegranate, because that's one of the ones Saffron's like, why would anybody put pomegranate in this? And that can mean conceit or foolishness. So there's a whole bunch, and she's just looking at these flowers and being like, why would anybody put these together? And then kind of an offhanded comment from Lee, because he noses into everything, makes her realize that maybe there are secret messages in these flowers. And so she goes off and finds an old florography dictionary and decodes the flowers and is like, huh. And then it just takes her on this ride, because she can't leave it alone. Of course, she found something fascinating. And so she gets herself involved, and that's it just so happens that she, as the daughter of, aristocracy, has connections to some of these women who were murdered, because they're also kind of upper class ladies. So she realizes that she can go places that Inspector Green can't go. And have conversations that he can't have. So she offers to befriend some of the suspects, and thus we get our book.
And I think that's one of the most fascinating things that you can do when you're writing historical fiction, is when you approach it from a woman doing your detecting. She literally can go places that a male police officer cannot go. And if she is aristocratic, or if conversely she is a maid, servants and aristocratic. I mean, women across the board could pretty much go anywhere men couldn't go to get intimate information about people, and to kind of, suss out friendships and all the good hot goss, and figure out, who is holding grudges. So do you have, before we leave the subject of florography, because I'm obsessed with it and we could talk about it literally for days. Do you have any, cool. It's so cool. Do you have any particular books that you would recommend for folks who are super interested?
Yes. So let me just say, there are like hundreds of florography books, and they have different definitions for different flowers. And it is very hard to find like one definition that is true across books. So when I started writing this book, it's like red roses, and like rosemary. Thank you, Shakespeare. So it's like literally like, but I mean, even within red roses, it's like, if it's too dark a red, it means like your regard has been like denied or something. And if it's very like light, yeah, exactly. Like, it's so complicated. The Victorians had way too much time on their hands, right? They had way too much time to like make up all these very like specific rules and stuff. But it depends on the book that you're reading.
Yeah.
So I used one book because it was the first one that I found online, and it's the book that is mentioned in my book because I wrote an author's note because I was like, hey, if you look these up, you're going to be confused because I was confused. So that one is Flowers, Their Language, Poetry, and Sentiment, and it was published in 1870. And you can find that in its entirely online. But if you want something more modern, there is this book that is a recently published book. You can see I have notes marking it. And this one is called The Complete Language of Flowers by Teresa Dietz. I'm not sure how to say her name, but it's beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
And it also, I love it because it marks the poisonous plants. So if you're into that kind of thing, it's a very cool book to have, just to like look through. And if you want to like send mysterious flowers, then you can do that.
To someone who hopefully knows how to decode them.
Yes. Or you can just, be sending them really sassy messages and they'll never know.
There you go. So Saffron is, she's impulsive. She's loyal. She does something monumentally stupid in book one. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Things that's really dumb.
Yeah. But she's a very accessible character because she's of her time, but she's also somebody that you can grasp hold of who she is and what she believes in. She's just, I mean, to me, I feel like reading Saffron, her driving force is loyalty, whether it's to what she believes in or who she believes in. Saffron will go to the mat for you. And you dealt with some really kind of modern, what we think of as modern subjects in the first book, but you did it in a really gracefully historical way. Like Saffron deals with sexual harassment. We have a character who does Tibetan meditation. And we think these are things that we're only really talking about, now. How did you find the process of incorporating those? And what made you decide to kind of bring those out in a book that's set in the 1920s?
Well, the sexual harassment was honestly just because I was thinking like, I mean, I wrote this in 2018. So if you think about what's going on in 2018, if I remember correctly, that's like right when the Me Too movement was really getting going. It was really hot and like everyone was talking about it. And people were reflecting about how like even today, like women face a lot of difficulties in the workplace. And it doesn't have to be as blunt as like straight up like sexual harassment, but like I mean, just subtle things, especially women in the sciences, like harder sciences are still full of these assumptions about what women can and cannot do and what they're good at and all of that kind of thing. So I think I didn't intentionally say to myself, I want to write like a Me Too movement book. It just came out because it was of the time. Like that was something people were really talking about. And they're like, this hasn't changed for 100 years. And like, yeah, because like, I mean, this is absolutely believable as something that would be going on then. But
oh my God.
I mean,
And you just referred to this book as being set 100 years ago. And that still doesn't click with me. You say 1920s to me and I'm like, that's 80 years ago. Like the math does not compute.
I know. I still think of the 80s as 20 years ago. And I'm like, this is
because it was.
Because it's not 50 years ago or 40 years ago. I can't do math. This is why I write, because I can't do math.
Exactly.
But yeah,
we have agents who math for us.
Yes, exactly. But I just wanted to, I wanted it to be like relatable. I wanted it to be things that people were talking about. And the meditation thing, I know so many people who have anxiety. I have so many friends and family members with anxiety, and they deal with it in very different ways. And I just wanted to like represent that. I wanted to like have some anxiety rep because we so often in our female-led books, we so often have really strong, badass male leads to be counterparts to them. And like, in my opinion, Alexander, who is the one with anxiety in this case, is like a total badass, but he also experiences anxiety. And he has what we know as PTSD, what they called shell shock. And he is trying to figure out a way to deal with it. And one of the things I really admire about him as a character is that he didn't just let himself have this problem that was really affecting him. he made the effort to like find something that worked, and it took him a while, but he got there.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And you've woven in this little kind of breath of romance into the book, which I'm always a big fan. I love my mystery with a little dollop of romance, which I think I probably learned from Agatha Christie. But at what stage did you realize that Parties and Poisons was going to be a book?
So I wrote the first 4 Saffron books in kind of a weird way. I decided one day that I was just going to try to write a book and see what happened and just do it for fun. And then, but like I was tripping over myself trying to get the words like out fast enough, because once I turned the tap on, it was not like a little dribble. It was like a geyser. And I wrote the first 4 books in like 4 months. I was teaching at the time, so it was over summer break. Yeah, it was like kind of surprising because I had never written like a book, and all of a sudden I'm writing like 4 over a couple of months. And then, to be fair, I didn't write another book for like 2.5 years. So it did not occur to me as I was writing the books that they would ever be books. But once I had my son, who is now 4, I knew that I was going to be staying at home with him. And I knew that this was my chance to do something with them, because I had started to write other books at that time. And I'm like, let's see what happens. So I started querying and doing revisions and things like that you have to do to make books into books that are like on your shelf. So, I mean, it wasn't until I got the offer from my editor for her to buy the books that I knew that it was actually going to happen.
Why historical mystery?
Oh, because I grew up with Agatha Christie and Poirot and Sherlock Holmes. You can 100% blame my parents for that, because we would all sit around the TV on a Sunday night and we would say, okay, do you want Sherlock, Poirot, Foyle's War? What do you want to watch? And we would watch them over and over and over. I have like all the Poirots memorized because we've watched them so many times.
I was going to say, I know you are a Sherlock Holmes and Poirot fangirl, just like I am. Because for me, like one of the first things I ever remember reading was you're far too young to know this, but when I was a child in the 70s, there were these abridged editions of classics that you could get in little chunky paperbacks. They were like this, and I got Hound of the Baskervilles. I think when I was 6.
The best.
So, yeah.
When you were 6?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That was a scary ass dog when you were 6. It absolutely was.
It's a scary ass dog anytime. Oh my God.
Yeah, they kind of cut out a little bit of the bit with Sir Hugo. They just
Probably
left enough that you knew he was a bad dude, but there was no implied rape in that one for kids. But so that is my sentimental favorite Sherlock Holmes. What is your go-to Holmes? What is your favorite?
Oh, I love A Scandal in Bohemia. I love it.
Irene.
Irene Adler. She's the best. And she's like the only woman that has ever turned Sherlock's eye. Yeah. And so, and just anyone where he gets into a disguise is the best. And that one has that. Scandal of Bohemia, he dresses up like a reverend, I think, to try to get into the house. And it's just the best. I think it's hilarious. I love the Jeremy Brett version. And so I've mostly watched them instead of read them. I should probably read them. But like
it's a fantastic read. But I actually saw it before I read it, because there was, again, way back in the darkness of prehistory, there was a stage version with Frank Langella that had been filmed, and I can't remember if it was actually on Broadway or not, but it was filmed and they aired it. This is back when HBO used to do a ton of Broadway theater that they would show, and it was a fantastic version. And I thought, okay, this is amazing, and went off and read it, because I hadn't read Bohemia at that point, so I went off and read it, and it was just, I was like, oh my God, Irene Adler, like,
yes.
You get such an immediate fangirl crush on this woman.
Yeah. I love like, and I don't even really think like she's the villain. Like she's not the villain, but
She's not the
she's the
villain.
antagonist in that one.
Yes.
I love a lady villain, and I love a really smart lady villain who will outsmart people. I just think it's so
Absolutely.
much fun.
Okay, so you're also a Poirot fangirl.
Oh my gosh.
What's your favorite Hercule adventure?
I love any of the ones where he's traveling. Like I'm a big sucker for the traveling ones just because I love seeing him so deeply uncomfortable. I think it's just hilarious. Like
Anytime
why
he
do you
gets seasick. Anytime
yeah,
he's
like why
seasick
are
is
you going on
amazing.
these trips, Poirot, if you hate them so much? Like if you're just gonna whine about it being hot and dirty, like why are you there? I love Death on the Nile, and then I think the other one I really love is Murder in Mesopotamia. But there's
Oh
one
my
other
God.
that I can't think of
Murder
off the
in
top of my head. That's a
Mesopotamia
great one.
is bonkers. And a lot of people
So
really,
good.
really, really hate that book. And because there's this massive, completely implausible plot point in it. And I think it's phenomenal because of that bonkers plot point. I love it. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to spoil it for folks who haven't read it yet because I think people just need to go read it because it is, like I said, it's bonkers and completely unbelievable. And yet I love the book.
Yeah, like I believed it. I believed it because I'm like I'm in the world of Poirot. And so
Yeah.
like murders are happening left and right. Like why can't implausible things happen also? Like that's fine with me.
Exactly. Exactly. Would you ever write a contemporary?
I have it's not published, but I have. I've written but it's not a mystery. It's like urban fantasy with like vampires and stuff because that is the other half of my author side is that I love fantasy books.
I
So
saw that mentioned on your website. So I wondered if there was something in your future with regard to pubbing fantasy.
I would love that. Let's speak it into the universe. That would be great. But yeah, I do. I don't know. I like writing everything. I like writing historical. I love fantasy. I love really anything with a lot of world building in it, which
Mhm.
is historical and fantasy. So if I can just keep writing those, I'll be happy forever.
So you mentioned that you've written 4 of the Saffron Everly books,
Mhm.
our lovely little botanist. So are all 4 of those under contract? Do we get to see all 4 of those?
Yes, 4 of them. I just announced a couple weeks ago that I have been offered book 4, and I'm definitely taking it. I'm so excited about book 4. I was writing the outline because you know when you pitch another book, you have to write the outline. You know this, the audience might not, but you write an outline and then you show it to your editor, and then they talk about it or whatever. But as I was writing it, I'm like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then like, can I just go ahead and write this? This is like really fun. Like there's seances and psychics, and we meet Saffron's family, and that's drama, and so it's going to be so much fun. I'm really excited. So that's not next summer, that's the summer after. So we still have a long way to go, but
I feel like if
that's
you
coming.
write historical mystery at some point, you have to do a seance. Like it's
Yes. I mean, like, not only is it super fun, but depending on the era that you're in, it's like very, very timely.
Mhm.
Because you know this again, Victorian era, huge surge of mysticism and spiritualism and all
Mhm.
of that. But then in the 20s, after the Great War, so many people
Mhm.
have lost loved ones. We have this other, like, not quite revival, but another surge of interest in the
Yeah.
mystical and the magical and all of that kind of thing. So I was like, how can I resist?
So why did you pick, if you were looking at historical periods, why did you go for the 20s instead of going for, Sherlock's gaslit London streets?
As tempting as it is, it really came down to my love of Poirot. Poirot is in the 20s and 30s. I love
Mhm.
the aesthetic. It's gorgeous. Like who doesn't want like flappers and stuff? It's so much fun. But really, it came down to when I came up with the idea. I was teaching American history, And then you're like, American history, what does that have to do with 1920s England? But it was because I made a point every year to get at least all the way through to World War One. And so we ended the school year every year around World War One. And so I'm thinking, and this is the time that I really let, because it's the end of the school year, I really let my kids spend a lot of time on it. It's a really interesting time, teaching kids about alliances and all of that kind of thing. But then we would get to like the end of the war and what were like the lasting consequences. And this is how I know that like I've grown as a human being, is because I hated history in school. I thought it was so boring. Nobody ever taught it to me in a way that was like interesting. And so I made a point when I taught it, I'm like, I'm going to make this interesting. So we would sit down and we would do our little story times where I would have my coffee and I'd be up on my chair and I'd be like, and then this happened. And then everybody freaked out. And then and that's how I would give my history lessons, because that's how I would have wanted to receive them. And my kids really liked it because I was like speaking their language. We would talk about, I don't know what kind of words were popular when I was teaching. We would be like, and then they said, bruh, like, don't do that. I mean, like it was the whole thing. It was the whole thing. And so we would get to the end of the war and we would talk about what was the results of the war. And we would always talk about the science and the huge explosion of science that happened during the war with like war technology and weapons and stuff, but also like the other stuff like radio and blood banks and things like that. And that is just something that's always really stuck with me. The idea that something so horrible as an incredibly destructive war would bring so many new technologies that we like still use today and have like revolutionized the world. So I guess, I don't know. I mean, I guess it was just that the 20s had so much there, apart from what we associate with the 20s, jazz and booze and, bright young things and stuff like that, Gatsby. Because, that adds some interesting flavor, and Flowers and Fatalities does touch on that. They're in the jazz club, they're with the bright young things, there's drugs, there's drinking. But there's also a lot of the other stuff, recovery from the war, on an individual level, on a societal level. We have the science that has taken off. So there's just so much there. There's a lot of richness there, not to mention all the political stuff. But I find politics kind of boring, so I don't really look at that very much. I try to look at the more interesting things for myself, because I don't want to get bored while I'm writing. So
very cool.
There's just a lot there.
I am going to pop down and look at our question, because we do have a question. So I'm going to go ahead and ask this one of you right now, and then we'll get back to the stuff I want to know. If anybody else has questions, be sure you pop them into our little chat down below. We are happy to field your questions. This one is actually for both of us. It says, what do you find to be the hardest part of crafting a good murder to be solved? You answer it first and then I'll go.
I think the clues, like I pantsed these books originally, like the OG drafts were all pantsed. That means I didn't have an outline. I was writing as I went. So figuring out the clues and then revision, because I didn't have an outline. And so I had to do a lot of revision as a result. But just finding the right clues and placing them, and also finding, for some of these mysteries, finding clues that Saffron could really sink her teeth into as a scientist. Being able to use her scientific knowledge and her specialty in botany is not always easy, because there's only so many botanical clues you can have in one book.
I think for me, the hardest part is making sure that you have the right balance between suspects, people who would plausibly be somebody that you could consider a person who might have done this, and balancing that out with how you go through, how your sleuths proceed through the mystery, and making sure that they are giving the right consideration to the right people. And making sure that you don't have, it can't be a case where everybody's suspected, but you have to suspect enough people so that it's not obvious right out of the gate who done it and why, because there's nothing, mystery readers in particular are extremely savvy. And
Yes.
especially if they cut their teeth on golden age crime, because golden age is when you saw people like Agatha Christie and Dorothy Sayers and Niall Marsh and all of these other people who were coming in and it's not only establishing what the genre was going to be, but in a lot of cases breaking norms. You know, until Agatha Christie, no one had ever had the unreliable narrator who themselves had done it. And then she writes Murder of Roger Ackroyd and everybody loses their minds. And so I think, you know, being able to you don't want to hoodwink readers, because you've always got to play fair in that they have to be able to say in hindsight, oh, I should have seen that. And my goal is always to have a reader want immediately to go back through the book and go, damn it, what did I miss? And go back, because to me, that's what I enjoy most as a reader, is when I'm surprised by what the resolution is. And then I go back and I look at those pieces of the puzzle again and say, well, that is exactly not what I thought those meant, but I see where you laid in exactly the information I needed, but maybe you camouflaged it, or maybe you hid it under something else and I didn't notice it right off the bat. That's always super fun. I love to mess with readers in that regard. We have another question that I'll go ahead and run with this one too for both of us. What has been one or some of the most interesting bits of information you've uncovered in research? And I actually had this on my list to ask you. So we are getting superb questions.
We are. I have to answer honestly. This is not information that I found researching saffron, although I can also offer some saffron things. But I will just say I have researched Turkish oil wrestling. Google it and you're welcome, or sorry that you saw that. But that's definitely the most strange thing that I've researched. And kind of in tandem with that was like, what is it called? The whether you're dancing underwater. It's like an Olympic sport, but I don't remember what exactly it's called. But that
synchronized
was also,
swimming.
Yes, thank you. That was so easy. Synchronized swimming.
I love synchronized swimming.
Something.
That's something that happens when you're doing live events, by the way, for anybody who's watching. You will literally blank on something like your own child's name. The names of characters in your books, like you will absolutely blank on that stuff. So I totally get why synchronized swimming was not just dropping in there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. now I'm like, think of something interesting about saffron, but like all of that is literally, it's just the poisonous plants. And for me, super interesting. Could and have spent all day reading about the plants and trying to like untangle like what the different toxins do, because that's something that saffron has to do. So I'm like, all right, in order to write this, I have to do it too. Luckily I have the internet and she didn't. I'm trying to
count how many poison books I've got down here. Especially,
how many poison books do you have?
Maybe 25.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah, because it is absolutely my favorite weapon to use when I write. So I have most of the poisons that you would use when you're writing Victoriana, like I do. I mean, I have one contemporary thriller that has come out. My first thriller dropped 9 months ago, and I got to use poison in it. But it's well, technically it is a plant, but they didn't get it from the plant. But I did get to use poison in it, and I was so stupidly excited that I got to use poison because it is just the best weapon. It's so cool. I was having a very really fascinating conversation with a medical professional yesterday. I had to go for a doctor's appointment, and we got on the subject of what I do for a living, and we were literally trying to figure out how her uncle may have murdered her aunt and what he could have used for it. And she's giving me the symptoms, and I'm like, okay, it wouldn't have been strychnine. Okay, cyanide doesn't do that. Okay, I know, it was the greatest day of my life. I loved it. I mean, I'm sorry the woman is dead. Absolutely. But the fact that there are real life cases out there to this day where you can go, oh my, like, do you ever run across those news stories where it's like, oh, some dentist, put a whole bunch of thallium in his wife's protein shake or something like that?
Yes, I ran across a case last year. I mean, I think it happened in like 2017 or something, but it was like exchange student was poisoning his flatmate, and there's like, I mean, there was some stuff going on like racially, but like the case was like he was losing weight and he was exhausted and all of this stuff. And I'm reading this article, I'm like, okay, what is it? What is it? And it was thallium. But
hair falling out.
Just hair falling out. That's the big one.
That's the big one.
But it's just crazy to me that like it's still happening today, and there's still poisons today. That's like the crazy poison from Princess Bride that's odorless, tasteless, and you can't like find it in whatever. And I saw that and I was like, wait a second, is that thallium? Because apparently thallium is odorless and tasteless. So.
And every once in a while, one of these cases will be solved because there's a nurse who like reads Agatha Christie and is like, hey, I recognize those symptoms, and somebody gets busted. You will absolutely love this. So I was on vacation in May, and my husband and I are walking around the resort at night, and I look down and I see this bush with these beautiful white flowers on it. It was datura. It was Jimson weed. It was Jimson weed. It was an angel's trumpet. And I was like, that is like the most poisonous thing I have ever been near in my entire life. And so in the middle of this beautiful romantic walk, I'm describing to him exactly what this plant can do to you. And it was lovely. It was a very special moment. I so enjoyed finding that plant.
Right. This is me every time I take a walk in our neighborhood. We have oleander growing at the end of our street. And then anytime we walk like in the garden center, I'm with my son and I say, that's poisonous. Don't touch that. That's poisonous. Don't touch that. And so now he's like, is this poisonous, mommy? Can I touch this? Is it going to poison me? It's very educational.
Actually, it is, because my husband and I compare notes, and we were both constantly playing with oleander bushes when we were kids, with no understanding at all of how lethal that would have been. So you're doing a good job there parenting, Kate. Much better than I did, because I'm 100% sure I never told my daughter about that stuff.
Well, and it's just crazy because it's everywhere. There's literally poisonous plants everywhere. And you don't know it until somebody says, hey, that's poisonous, or you stick it in your mouth.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there was literally a case of Ukrainian grandmothers baking up rhubarb pies for Russian soldiers who were coming in to occupy their village, but they were using the leaves and not the stalks, which, if you know anything about rhubarb, those Russian soldiers got dead real quick, because you can't do that. You can't eat rhubarb leaves.
Oh my gosh.
So I think we've answered that question. Do you both have an example of a murder mystery that gave you that shock of discovery? I'm going to let you take that one first.
Oh, what did I do? I clicked on something. Sorry.
That's okay. Did you hear the question?
Yeah. The shock. Okay. Let me look at my shelves. I have my shelves behind me. Oh yeah. I mean, there are many. Like, truly, there's too many to count, because I read so many of these books when I was like a young person, or I saw them the adaptations of them as a young person. But when I discovered Carrie Greenwood's Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, which, if you haven't heard of it,
we love
go find it. It's amazing.
We love Franny.
Yes, she's the best. She's the best. She is also a reason why I ended up in the 1920s, because I'm like, Franny Fisher is amazing. I'm going to write my own version of that. And it's called
the adaptations are so good. The series, so good. They're so much fun to watch.
Watch them just for the clothes alone. Like, if you don't even care about mysteries, go watch them just for the costuming, because it's so much fun.
And Essie Davis is just phenomenal in the role. Like, she just inhabits.
I love how this is going off, but I love how they changed the character of Jack. Because in the books, the lead detective is very kind of nondescript and whatever, but in the TV version, he becomes the love interest, and they're just like perfect
It
together.
was a great change
So
to the
good.
adaptation. Yeah,
So
yeah.
good.
It works really good.
Yeah.
So,
But
Phryne was
Shock
part
of
of your Shock of
Discovery.
Discovery. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the very first one is called Cocaine Blues. And it has a great ending. It was a great, like, oh wow, like I didn't see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
That I really enjoyed. What about you? Can you think of one?
Yeah, actually, there are two series that I have absolutely loved, and one of them is Elizabeth Peters, the Amelia Peabody Mysteries, and the first one is Crocodile on the Sandbank, and there are like 29 in the series.
There's a
But
ton.
that was the very first time that I realized that historical mystery could be funny. Because I
That's a
think
great
they're
discovery.
absolutely hilarious, and it absolutely changed my life, because that was when I realized I could meld the different things that I wanted to do, and be the writer.
Oh, I don't know if that's me or Deanna. I guess we'll find out.
I can hear you. Hear me?
I can hear you, but you're frozen.
You were frozen, and now you're not.
Interesting.
Okay, well, let's
Hopefully
just keep going.
It'll stay. Okay.
And then the other one was Sarah Caudwell, Caudwell, wrote it's a short series. It's only like 4 books. The Hilary Tamar mysteries. They're set in like the 1980s in the UK, and it's a group of young barristers, and Hilary Tamar is a professor, and all the mysteries are narrated from Hilary's point of view, and you never ever know Hilary's gender. And it is phenomenal, because you can interpret it's amazing. It is the greatest conjuring trick, and you can imagine the book multiple ways as you're reading, depending on, is Hilary male? Is Hilary female? Is Hilary non-binary? We don't know. But to be able to pull that off through 4 books is phenomenal. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And they're just being reissued right now. Some of them just because she passed away not long after writing the 4th book. And so the series didn't go beyond that, but she, and the books were only available mass market for a really long time, but now they're coming back, and they're available in trade paperback, which is great, because, my eyes are getting older. I like a lot of white space on the page. Mass markets are kind of the bane of my existence. I like me a bigger trade paperback. So I'm very happy with that. Kate, if Saffron sold for a series or film, who is your ideal leading lady?
Oh man, I'm going to pretend like I have not thought about this for hours and spent time creating renderings of this on social media. My ideal actress, and she'll be too, if it ever sold and was produced or whatever, she'd be way too old for the part by then. But it's Lily James.
Oh God, yes, we love Lily James.
She's amazing. She was Lady Rose in Downton Abbey, for those of you who aren't familiar with her name. She just has a really lovely ability to be very like kind of perky and naive seeming, but also like has like great depth. And I feel like she could bring that kind of, not quite naivety, but like also not naivety, because Saffron is a little naive. She's very young. Along with, a little backbone. And I feel like she'd just be perfect for the role.
I think she'd be perfect casting for Saffron. Yeah. She'd be great.
And then I haven't seen this movie, but it's the Potato Peel Literature Society of Guernsey or something. And she's in that movie, and the guy that she's opposite in that movie would be an excellent Alexander.
Well, there you go. You've got it all sorted out.
Yeah, I have spent way too much time thinking about this. But I actually don't have a fan cast for Lee. I need to think about who would be a great Lee. Because he would be so much fun.
Mm-hmm. You gotta apply yourself to that and put it out on social media. Everybody will be happy. Okay, for both of us, what is the first part of the book that you think of? Is it crime, solution, or simply an intriguing way for someone to die? and work backwards from there. Where do you start, Kate?
Well, if we're starting with the mystery, then it's the premise. Like I just want like an intriguing premise for how the body got there. Like, or like, you know, what's the setup? I like a cool setup. So like for Flowers and Fatality, I knew that I wanted to use florography and I knew that it was going to be a murder mystery. So like I had to connect murder with flowers. But I mean, in general, when I think of starting a new book, I'm thinking about what Saffron is doing. And for the first book, the first scene that I came up with was her making the very stupid decision, which go read the book if you're curious what the stupid choice was.
Very stupid decision.
It is. It's very dumb, but it's kind of, it works.
Reading.
So
it makes for fascinating reading.
So it's the first thing I came up with for that book was Alexander getting really mad at her for the bad decision. That's the first thing that I wrote of Saffron. And then for this book, it was just her and Lee battling wits in the opening scene. I knew that I wanted them to just immediately out the gate kind of be at each other's throats, and Lee be really charming and obnoxious and Saffron just hate him for it. So that's how we started with those books. But yeah, I mean, for me, for the mystery, it's the premise, an interesting, weird beginning to the story. What's yours?
It's got to be a hook of some sort. It's very similar to you. It's not usually the specifics of the murder. Every once in a while, something will come up and I know for sure I'm going to use it. But usually, most often, it's like the one that I just did that came out a couple months ago is book 8 in my Veronica Speedwell series, and which is my Victorian mystery series. And Veronica's Lepidopterist, she's a butterfly hunter. And this book is a sinister revenge. And I knew that I wanted it to be, I had kind of a thought in my head of who I wanted to be doing the murders and why. I knew I wanted this to be like a sleeping murder, a murder in retrospective where it had happened 20 years before and somebody's coming along to bump people off because they're getting vengeance for an older crime. So that was it was the hook. It was what that was going to be about. And at the same time, I was thinking about Mary Anning, who was in right around the time Jane Austen was alive. Mary Anning was a young woman who was collecting fossils along the Jurassic coast of England and was selling them. And that's how she made a living. And if you've ever heard the rhyme, she sells seashells by the seashore, that's about Mary Anning, because she would literally she would hoist herself down a cliff and chisel out these fossils and literally just sell them to people on the beach. And she discovered like entire dinosaurs locked into the coastline. And I thought, okay, I'm going to need me some dinosaurs. And then I also ran across a mention of shortly after the Crystal Palace exhibition in the middle of the 19th century, there was a giant model of an iguanodon that a whole bunch of Victorian gentlemen, I think there were a dozen of them, had a dinner party inside. And I thought, okay, I've got vengeful murder, I've got a dinosaur dinner party, and I got dinosaurs in a cliff. This is all going to come together. These are all going in the same book.
You're giving me a hard time here because I'm saving that book. That is like my little rainy day when I really need to pick me up. This is the book that I'm going to be reading. You're making it really hard to hold off because now I really need to read this book.
What's so cute is if you look in the detail, I think, hang on, let me see if I can reach it. If you look, they actually gave me little tiny ammonites and a little dinosaur head on the cover. Isn't that so cute? I got little fossils, which I think is adorable. Yeah.
I don't know who your cover designer is, but they deserve a pat on the back because every single cover, I'm like, yes.
The Berkeley art department is just phenomenal. And your covers are gorgeous. They're very lush, which suits the floral motif so well. It absolutely does. We have another question for both of us. Is there a time period you believe has been underutilized in mystery? And would you ever want to write for that time period? Because there's a lot of Victorian.
I was going to say, I definitely have a particular time period that I think is really overdone. It's not Victorian because I could read Victorian forever. I love it. But I would not I hope that this does not come back to bite me, 30
It's
years
just
from now
between
when I'm
us. It's just
trying
between
to,
us.
and like 60 people. I
Right.
would not write World War II because I feel like there's
Yeah.
so much. People have really delved into it. They're telling from all different perspectives as well, which is great. But I don't think I would do that. But
Yeah.
underutilized that I would want to write about. That I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know.
I think there is a huge amount of potential in Restoration England, and there's not a ton written about it. And it was,
can you give us the years for that? Because I don't know
so
off the top of my head.
Restoration England is 1660 and on. It's the start of the reign of Charles II. And the reason this was such a wonderfully bonkers time period is because it follows the interregnum, where Oliver Cromwell was Lord Protector of England. They didn't have a king. And after Cromwell's death, everything kind of falls apart. And they're like, you know what? Maybe we should king again. And so they bring Charles II over from where he's been exiled since his father's death. And he's like 30, and he comes to the throne and everything breaks loose because, of course, there wasn't Christmas under the protectorate. There wasn't all of the theaters were closed, and people were not wearing bright colors. And so when Charles II comes to the throne, all of a sudden everything kind of explodes, and you've got people who are just absolutely losing their minds because it's a big upheaval, like the 1920s. It's a time when there's a big upheaval in society, and it's one of those times where the kaleidoscope turns, and so everything in perspective shifts, and they open the theaters again, and you've got women are taking a role at court because Charles II loves him a mistress. And so you have all of these women who are kind of larger than life and have these really big personalities. And so I think there's a tremendous scope for restoration mystery. But again, it's a time period not a ton of people are familiar with, but it's so fascinating. You've got the Great Fire, you've got the plague, you've got all sorts of phenomenal stuff going on at that time period, which makes for high drama. I think that there are some Aphra Behn mysteries. And Aphra Behn was a playwright. She was a spy. She was a phenomenally interesting woman. So I think that there's a line of mysteries featuring her. But other than that, there's not a ton being done. And I think it's kind of ripe for potential.
You've convinced me. Although I think,
yeah, I'm not going to write it, but I wish
I'm not going to write it. I don't want to do that research. I don't want to do that research.
I know, but and that's the thing. When you start researching a time period, you get sucked into that rabbit hole and you never get out, and you just keep adding to your information to the point where you go, I cannot possibly expand to another time period. I'm very tired and I know way too much about this little microcosm and I cannot go out of it. It's too much.
Yeah. I've been contemplating a story in the 30s, and I'm like, I don't know. Because a lot still applies
it's 20s
from the
adjacent.
20s. Yeah, it's 20s adjacent, and so I'm like, I'm cool with it. But anything past that out, or like way before that, I'm like, I don't have the time to invest in research for this.
I totally feel you. All right, my darling, we have exhausted the questions from the audience, and we, I think, are just about out of time. So I think it's time for us to beckon the powers that be back from Mysterious to help us out.
And I am
Are you
here.
sure? Because this was really fun. Can we just keep talking?
I know.
Okay, let's go for another hour. All right.
I would, except it's 10 o'clock and I have to go pack because I'm going to Venice tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
That's the best reason. That's the best reason to sign off.
Right. I'm sorry. I gotta go.
Well, before we do, I have the one last question of where can people follow you on social media to know what's going on with you both?
Kate?
I am author Kate Khavari on everything, and I will paste it into the chat because people sometimes don't know how to spell my name, which is fair. There's an H, it confuses people.
There's a book. You get the book. You'll
I
know
know.
how
You
to
just
spell
look at the book and you'll be fine. But I am that on all platforms. I'm very active on Instagram, very active on Twitter. Facebook usually just gets my reposts from Instagram, but if you're there, you can follow me there as well. And I have a newsletter that comes out once a month, and you can find that on my website, which is just kkhavari.com.
And I popped my website link into the chat. You can find me at deannaraybourn.com. I have a monthly newsletter that goes out the 5th of each month. I am very active on Twitter, unfortunately, because it's trash right now. And I try to remember to post on Instagram. And I'm also over at Blue Sky. So whenever that goes public, you can find me there.
I highly recommend following Deanna on Twitter. She's hilarious. She makes it less garbage.
Oh, thank you for that.
And don't forget, everyone, while you still have a chance, you can get both Kate and Deanna's books. If you get Kate's books, not only we get a signed book plate, but as discussed earlier, once it focuses, you get the bookmark with, lo and behold, some of the flower secret messages right there for you. Handy dandy. And for Deanna's books, we have, while supplies last, some signed book plates. So please go ahead and order those. Thank you so much, everyone. Kate, Deanna, thank you so much for doing this. It was a fun discussion.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I had so much fun. Thank you. And thank you, Deanna. You are my hero.
Anytime, sister.
All right, everyone. I hope you have a good day, evening, morning, if you're watching in the future, all that stuff. All right. We hope to catch you in our next one. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.